Who gets to decide what's best for your children, you or the government? We're asking the Supreme Court to settle that dispute. Hi, I'm Stuart Shepard, and this is First Liberty Live. Thank you for liking and sharing our videos with your friends and family. See that little thumbs up button down there? Just click on that. That'll help us get the word out to a lot more people, and thank you for doing that. My longtime friend and colleague, Hiram Sasser, is Executive General Counsel here at First Liberty Institute. Hey, Hiram.
Hey, thanks for having me.
I'm glad you're here because this is a case that really gets to something that is important as far as the rights of parents to parent their children. I mean, it really gets to the issue of it. Tell us about Blake Warner. What is at stake here? What is the question that they're working on in court?
Yeah, well, Blake brought a case, and really what the case is about is really not as important. It had to deal with some political issues that were going on in his local school district.
Yeah.
But brought this case on behalf of his son. And the court said, well, you know, you're not allowed to bring, he did it without a lawyer.
Yeah.
And that, well, you can bring a case on behalf of yourself. It's called bringing a case pro se. You can file a case pro se.
That means without an attorney.
And you're just going to do it by yourself,
yeah.
Which is fine. The federal law allows that. The statute actually says you can either bring it on your own or with help of a lawyer. And so he brought this case that he was bringing on behalf of his son, without the aid of a lawyer. And the court said, well, you're not allowed to do that. What are you talking about? We're all allowed to do that, but they said you're not allowed to do that. And so he ended up losing there at the district court and then got to the Court of Appeals, and then that's when we got involved.
Now, everybody's going to have an opinion over whether it's a good idea to represent yourself in court, or in this case, represent your son in court. But that's not what this case is about. It's about whether you have the right to do that under the Constitution. And that's where we come into the picture, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's the way to phrase it really, I think, is can the government prohibit you from representing your child, get in the way of the relationship between a parent and a child? See, federal law prohibits the child from bringing their own case. That makes sense. An 8-year-old doesn't know how to sue their school district.
Yeah.
But then, so only children have to have a lawyer. So either you have to hire a lawyer or you have to forfeit that right and cannot pursue it.
Okay.
But it's all under this precept as if that the parent and the child are these separate things that should be governed separately, and that their relationship is not together. And that's where the real rubber meets the road.
It's sort of self-evident, but I want to clarify it, and that is this. First Liberty Institute exists to defend religious freedom. That's all we do. It's our exclusive focus for all Americans. How is this a First Liberty case? I'm not hearing religious freedom in here, so what makes it one of our cases?
So one of the foundational elements of protecting religious liberty is protecting parental rights. It's very, very important. It has to do with whenever parents are trying to teach their kids their faith. Parents are trying to just decide for their kids what's going to happen at school. What locker room they're not going to share with somebody, and those sorts of things, right? Yeah. Those are all decisions driven by faith. Okay, but there's a fundamental building block in bringing those cases, and that's parental rights. So for about 100 years, a little over 100 years, the U.S. Supreme Court has recognized a fundamental right of parents to direct the education and upbringing of their children.
As we should have the right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that makes total sense. And that is a building block that we use for a number of our religious liberty claims and rights and cases that we bring where parents are trying to direct the education and upbringing, in our case, for faith purposes, but they're trying to direct the education and upbringing of their kids, and the government is trying to interfere. So this right is extremely important, and this is the right that's implicated in this case.
Let's talk about how it's fared in the courts so far. What have we seen up to this point?
Well, look, Blake was representing himself, and he lost at the district court, and then lost at the Court of Appeals.
And this is on the question of whether he could represent his son,
this is
not about what his original challenge was all about.
The underlying case is almost irrelevant right now.
Yeah.
What this case is about is whether or not He has a fundamental right to be able to direct the education and upbringing of his children, including the right to be able to represent him in court. Again, just technically, he actually has the right to represent his son's interests in court, and you have a right to bring your own claims in court without a lawyer. Where the rubber meets the road is whether or not a child, the parent being authorized to represent, does that extend to also being able to represent them in court without having to hire a lawyer?
Yeah.
But the government shouldn't be deciding this. That's the most important point here, is that it's a constitutional right to direct the education and upbringing of your children. You have a right to parent. Now, whether it's a good idea, that's a separate issue.
Yeah.
Obviously, we're lawyers now representing Blake. They're represented now.
Yeah.
But we're fighting for his right to be able to go back down to district court so that he can represent his own child in the same way that you should be able to represent your child or I should be able to represent mine.
If you choose to.
If you choose to,
And that's
exactly.
that's the key of this whole thing. It's you have the right to do that. You have the so they lost at the district court on this. They lost at the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals on this. The 11th Circuit said they were bound by a precedent. Tell us about that. That it was kind of like their hands are tied, right?
Well, most of the federal courts that have addressed this issue have arrived at the same conclusion, but for different reasons.
Okay.
And they try sometimes to say, well, the text of the statute that says that you have to bring your own claims or you are bringing claims being represented by an attorney means that you can't represent your child. But then there's other rules that parents are supposed to represent their children in court. As a matter of fact, whenever we sue a school district on behalf of kids, we actually represent the parent as the next friend,
Yeah.
as the representative of their child. We actually couldn't bring the case on behalf of just the child. We have to represent the parent. That's how you represent the child, is you represent them through the parent. Why? Because parents control and direct the education and upbringing of their kids.
Got it.
That's a very sacred relationship that the government can't interfere with. As a matter of fact, as you know, I mean, your parental rights can be terminated, but there's a huge process that has to go through. Why? Because those are fundamental rights that are guaranteed by the Constitution. They are baked into the American system. And so for us now to go to court, and it's been for different reasons, to say, well, some of the policy reasons is, well, it's not a good idea to represent your own child. Well, maybe it's not a good idea to represent yourself either, but you have a right to do that.
Yeah.
So that's what's really going on in this case.
All right. The question then being brought to the Supreme Court is, what are we asking them to do to fix this?
What we're asking them to do is to say, look, in light of this ambiguous nature of what's going on with the various federal courts that have addressed this, and most of them have, is that there is a fundamental right in the Constitution to direct the upbringing and education of your kids. That fundamental right includes the right of parents to be able to represent their children in court, that they are to be treated essentially as one and the same. These are not separate people, separate entities. It's the same principle, it's the same right as if for some reason your child went to school and declared that well, they're going to be a different gender now. And the school decided, oh, okay, well, they can make their own decisions. That 8-year-old's extremely wise. We're not allowed to give them an aspirin, but I mean, they can transition to another gender.
Which
That's
is
fine.
literally happening in California right now.
Exactly. And so, look, if they're a separate legal entity, they're completely separate from the parents, all right, then that drives a wedge in that relationship that the government can take advantage of in certain jurisdictions that really don't like the parents getting involved in the government shaping the ideology of their kids. And so one way to combat that is to strengthen that that parent-child relationship,
right,
that fundamental right to direct the education and upbringing of your children. And this is a very important aspect of that, which is recognition that the parent and the child are essentially the same.
So what I'm hearing is the appeals courts have come at this from different ways, making different arguments, but getting to the same conclusion. We're asking the Supreme Court to clarify this, to make clear that parents have a fundamental right here to direct the upbringing of their children. Am I getting it right?
That's exactly right.
Okay.
And our argument is consistent with what Congress actually said in the statute when they laid it out that you can bring your own claims. Bringing your own claims is bringing claims also on behalf of your minor children.
Okay. We've asked the court to take this. What happens next in the process? They haven't said yes yet. That's what we're hoping to hear
Well,
next.
we hope for the court to say yes, that they will, they agree that they will hear the case.
Yeah.
And when they grant that petition for them that we're asking them to hear the case, then both sides will file more briefing, big long, fat briefs, filled with legal arguments on both sides, and then potentially there would be an oral argument, and then a decision finally to decide once and for all, do parents have the fundamental right to represent their kids in court or not?
Okay. I'm going to ask this. It sounds like a dumb question at this point in the conversation, but I want to hear your answer on it. Why should the Supreme Court take this up? Why is this a key case for them?
Well, I think it's really important because the lower courts have struggled without Supreme Court guidance. That's really, really important. But secondly, we're entering this weird time right now where parental rights are starting to get a little murky. Mm-hmm. People are starting to say, well, like we talked about, like an 8-year-old can decide their gender, and different other things like that. There are things that are going on where the government, in certain areas, all right, not Texas, all right, but in many areas around the country, there are governments that are trying to interfere with the parent-child relationship. The fundamental right to direct the education and upbringing of your children is so important. It's very critical now, and we have to fight to make sure that is as robust as possible. And one of the clearest areas where courts have been going astray is that not treating parents as the true legal representatives of their children. If you have custody of your child, you have parental rights, then you are responsible for your child, and you have that authority to interact with the government on behalf of your child.
Very good. I have a different question for you here, and it has nothing to do with this case, but it has to do with this. You are the second longest serving First Liberty employee right after Kelly Shackelford. How many years have you been here now?
I've been here for 23 years.
Why is your heart in this? You've devoted literally your life's work to this. Why is your heart in this? Why do you keep showing up every day?
Well, I keep showing up because we keep having more clients.
Well, there is that.
And people who need our help.
Yeah.
Look, this is people think that, they've always thought this, I've heard this a lot, if we could just win this case, if we could just win that case, if we just win Coach Kennedy case, we can get rid of Lemon versus Kurtzman, we'll be able to bring back Ten Commandments monuments and nativity scenes and everything else, right? But here's the real truth of the matter. This isn't practice. Like, we're not just showing up and we get to, whatever plans we have, we get to proceed. There's an opponent on the field, and they don't actually go to sleep. They work very, very hard, and they're fighting against parental rights. They're fighting against religious liberty. They're fighting against free speech. And so we have to get up, and the fight continues. It changes a little bit over time. There's more nuances that get inserted, but they are not going to rest until the government can just tell you how your kids are going to be raised. There are groups out there that would love for nothing more than for the school to be able to tell your kids lots of ideological things that they should believe, and also make it a crime for a parent to disagree with that. All right, there are people who would like that to happen. There are places around the world where that is actually happening.
100%.
And so we have to continuously fight against that. So you win a case over here, that's great. The other side changes tactics, so we got to go defeat them over there, and so on and so forth. So whenever the other side's done, I'll be done.
So go back to that very first day, though. You came here, you interviewed for a job. It was a very small organization at that point. Why did you go looking for First Liberty at that point in your career?
Well, that was sort of by accident. My wife had sent my resume, unbeknownst to me.
Well,
I got a call to come do an interview with a place that I didn't really know existed.
Okay.
Practicing in an area of law that I didn't really know was a real area. And I came down here and interviewed on a whim. And now they can't get rid of me.
Clearly, you got the job, and you've been doing the job, and we're grateful that you're here, Hiram. Thank you for the work you've done for all these years and for the work you're doing tomorrow.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Glad you're here. And thank you for being part of this. If these issues resonate with you and you'd like to join us to be part of our team here at First Liberty in a sense, just go to firstlibertylive.com, look for the big red Give button up at the top of the page. If you want to see changes made in the real world to protect parental rights, to protect our religious freedoms in so many different arenas, this is one way that you can affect real change in the real world. First Liberty is fighting for what matters most.